Hello and welcome to lesson number 8. Learn how to cook and clean. First we'll talk about cooking. Dear ladies, in this lesson I'm going to talk about cooking and cleaning. Today Western women consider cooking and cleaning as some form of oppression of the patriarchy. Barely a woman under the age of 30 can cook or clean to save her life today. Jennifer was a terrible cook. She would not even cook nutritious meals for her own children as she got older. When I would come home from travelling to Ireland and turn up for dinner, she would serve frozen foods like frozen fish and frozen chips. After a few times of seeing this, I took issue with her and I talked to her in private one evening, and the conversation went like this. Me: what the hell do you think you're doing serving frozen food to our children as their main meal of the day on weekends? What is wrong with you? These are our children. You are to serve them healthy and nutritious meals. She says they get the food they need at school. I hit the roof. The conversation continued as follows. What are you talking about? And she says the school serves a good hot meal at lunchtime, and so there is no need for me to make them a full meal for their dinner. I could barely believe what I was hearing. And I could barely believe I was hearing this only by investigating. The concept that my wife would not be feeding our children good, wholesome food had never occurred to me. Didn't even occur to me this could be possible. Feeding our children frozen food was so far out of my realms of thinking that the thought of it never even occurred to me. So I said to her, how long has this been going on? How long have you been feeding the children frozen foods for their dinner? And she said about 6 months. And I was furious, absolutely furious. And I said, I go out to work every day and I work my heart out for you and the children. I've risked my life in places like Saudi Arabia where compounds were getting blown up. A man from my compound was killed. A man I worked with was shot in the leg and injured. Saudi Arabia is a dangerous place to work right now. I went there because there is a recession. I went there to provide money for you and the children so you can have everything you need, including good food. I come back here and I find out that you cannot even be bothered to buy fresh food to make nourishing meals for our children. I come back here to find out you are too lazy to even take proper care of our children's health and well-being. This is what you are doing behind my back. This is what you think is not important for me to know. The food you put in my children's mouth is not important for me to know about. If you can believe this, she even tried to defend her position. She said, well, they get a hot meal at lunchtime so they can just have frozen food, and what I make for dinner, it will not hurt them. And I said, I cannot even believe what I'm hearing. Did you ever do this to your children when I was coming home every day and seeing what was served for dinner? No. When we lived in Sydney and I was coming home for dinner, the meals were meat and 3 vegetables, just as you and I had as a child. And frozen foods were the exception, maybe a Sunday night. But the food we ate was good food. Now, just because I'm not here and on the excuse of, well, they get one other good meal, you think you can get away with being lazy and serving frozen food? What the hell are you thinking? You don't even work. You have nothing to do but keep the house clean and take care of the children. You are living the life of Riley, and even then, you can't be bothered to cook for your own children? This is not okay. This is not acceptable. These are our children. You are to give them good food so that they grow up strong and healthy. Good food is very, very important to a child. You are to make nutritious meals for the children. If you want to eat frozen food for yourself, then knock yourself out. But for our children, you are to make good, nutritious meals. You are their mother, for goodness sake. I should not have to be explaining this to you. What the hell is wrong with you? That's what I said to her. Now Jennifer was suitably admonished and started making some more nutritious meals for the children. Well, at least when I was home. Who knows what she was doing when I was away working. So ladies, let me assure you, quality men notice if a woman can cook properly. It's not something that we miss. If a woman will not cook properly, then quality men will not marry them because they know that the woman will not feed their children nutritious meals. Cooking and preparing good meals is one of the most important tasks a woman can do in the household. To tell you some stories from my childhood, my mother was not a great cook in terms of talent, but what she lacked in talent she made up for in love and dedication to make good nutritious meals for us 3 boys. Every evening there was a hot meal on the plate, and it was meat and 3 vegetables at least. We would eat at the table together, and this was a time of the day when we could ask our father questions about our day, or we could tell our father about our day. It was at the dinner table that much of the advice I received from my father was dispensed. Mum would stay quite quiet at the dinner table and let the rest of us talk. It was only years later that I realised they must have spoken privately about this and worked out this arrangement between themselves. At the end of every meal, we were to thank our mother for preparing our meal. Her work and our meal was not to be taken for granted. I was genuinely thankful for my meals. By the time dinner time came, I was usually very hungry as I was playing a lot of sport, and I would get home from sports training and be famished. Dinner was always a highlight of my day. We were also to thank our father for working to provide us after each meal. We also had our schedules for who would do the washing and the wiping of dishes. Each night one of us boys had to lay the table, one of us had to wash, and one of us had to wipe. There were plenty of jobs to go round. As my mother used to say, I did not have dogs to bark myself, make yourself useful. My mother was very big on that saying. Woe betide any of us who did not make ourselves useful or do exactly as asked. Now here's a story of my childhood. One of the meals my mother used to make was spaghetti bolognese. It was spicy for me as a 7-year-old, and I didn't like it. It stung my mouth and tasted too strong. I asked my mother if she would please make me something else. I told her that it was not that her cooking was bad, it was just that it was too spicy and I didn't like it. She would not relent, and about once per week I had to eat spaghetti bolognese. One night, as 7-year-old boys do, I was clowning around and I put my plate of food on my hand and held it next to my shoulder as I had seen Italian waiters do on TV. Well, 7-year-old boys should not hold their food like that, as the inevitable happened. I spilled my dinner onto the floor, and I will never forget the look my father gave me. He simply went to his chair, removed his belt, sat down and indicated for me to come over. He bent me over, pulled down my pants and strapped my behind with his belt without so much as a word. Not only did the spanking really hurt, it really hurt because I knew I deserved it. I thoroughly deserved it. I knew I had disrespected my mother, and my father was teaching me to appreciate what my mother did for me. I was being taught a lesson. After I was spanked, my father stood up and said to me in his most harsh and stern voice, "You are to go to the shower, put on your pajamas, and go to bed. You will have no dinner tonight. Now apologize to your mother for what you have done and go." So I went to my mother and said I was very, very sorry for spilling her food on the floor and that it would never happen again. Head hung low, I headed out of the kitchen to take my shower and go to bed. I cried myself to sleep knowing the wrong that I had done. In the morning, I came out very sheepily to see how I would be greeted. My mother gave me her traditional greeting, and this was, "Good morning, darling, sweetheart, treasure of mine." I asked her if she really forgave me for spilling her food, and she told me yes, that these things happen for boys and that I had been punished as my father saw fit. I had apologized, I was genuinely sorry and remorseful, and I had promised never to do the same again. Mum reiterated that when someone does something wrong and they accept their punishment, they are genuinely sorry and they genuinely promise never to do the same again, then he must be forgiven. And this is how these things worked. So she explained all that to me again, because, I was 7 and repetition is the mother of learning for small boys. So I asked sheepily if there might be something to eat because I was very hungry now that I had no dinner the night before. I think I ate about 12 Weet-Bix that morning. Usually I ate 6 of them, but I was pretty famished from going to bed with no food. I had been taught my lesson, that my mother's cooking was to be respected. It was a labour of love each and every day. To disrespect that labour of love was a very, very serious thing in my father's eyes. I went on to learn to love my mother's spaghetti bolognese, and it became one of my favourite meals, one I made for myself many times. Many times I eat it, I think of that experience and remember my lesson to always be thankful for the food on my plate. My grandmothers were also great cooks. It was always a pleasure to be served a meal by my grandmothers. I recall as a teen we would go out shooting rabbits, and we would ask my mother's mother to cook these rabbits, and she had 101 recipes for rabbits. Of course, unknown to us boys, meaning my cousins and I, when our parents were little, my grandmothers had to make do with cooking rabbit for their children because there was such a shortage of meat during and after the war. One day my grandmother sat us down and told us of that time and how she had to learn all these different ways to cook rabbits so that it looked and tasted different for her children when they were our age. She laughed heartily and said, "I never in all my days ever thought my grandchildren would ask me to cook rabbit for them over chicken and beef. Lord, how strange things work out sometimes," which is one of her many phrases. Lord, how strange things work out sometimes, she used to say. My other grandmother, my father's mother, was the queen of pickles. At the end of each summer, as the autumn came and the tomatoes were not going to ripen, we would pick all the tomatoes and bring them to Nana's place to be made into pickles. It was an annual event, as you can imagine. We would spend all day helping Nana cook these pickles. Not that we were much help, of course, but she humoured us as she loved to have her grandchildren fussing around her. My dear ladies, there is no food in the world better than Nana's cooking. Why? Because Nana's cooking is made with love. All us grandchildren knew this. Nana's rabbit and Nana's pickles were some of the best foods I ever had. Of course, my mother would understand my praise of the cooking of my nanas and not take offence. She was pleased that all us kids got along so well with our grandmothers. I used to eat those pickles just on plain bread. In the time we had pickles from the season, I would be begging my mother over and over to be allowed to eat more pickles, fearing my brothers would eat my share. My dear ladies, women who can cook well and who take pride and pleasure in cooking good food for her quality man, and who talk of the times they will make good and wholesome food for their children, will be noticed. We think that a woman who is happy in the kitchen preparing food for her children and considers it a privilege and a blessing to be able to feed her children good quality food is much more attractive to us than a woman who sees cooking as a chore to be endured. Us quality men know that cooking is work. We know it takes time. We know it takes effort. Unlike women who say, men never allowed women to work in the old days, us quality men know that women worked hard in the home and that work was very important, especially the work of cooking. That so many women deny that this was work with the ludicrous claim women were not allowed to work in the old days is just an insult to my grandmothers who raised their children during and after World War II when things were very tough in country Australia. So the first lesson today, my dear reader or listener, is that quality men notice women who cook as a pleasure, who cook as a privilege, and who do not cook as a chore. We notice a woman who will not cook at all. We will not marry women who will not cook at all. We will leave those women to some other foolish men to marry. And just on 14 minutes, I think it's time for a word from one of our sponsors. And thank you very much for returning. Next topic is cleaning. When I was little, 5 years of age, my father's mother was the cleaner for my primary school. All the other boys knew she was my grandmother, and I felt embarrassed that my nana was the lowly school cleaner. The other boys teased me that she was the cleaner, and I had the idea that my nana should have a better job at her age than simply cleaning the school buildings for my school. So one night at dinner I decided to tell my father how I felt and asked his advice. Of course, he had no idea I felt this way about his mother. He asked me why I felt that cleaning was somehow a job that was not worthy of my nana. And I said to him that as an older woman, if she didn't have to have a job, shouldn't she have a better job? And I said cleaning is such a dirty job and such a hard job. It is the sort of job maids and servants do. Why should my nana do it? Remember, I was 5, okay? This is how 5-year-olds think. I will never forget what my father did next. He asked me to stand from the table and come with him. So I did. And he took me to the toilet room we had and asked me, "Who do you think cleans the toilet every day?" Of course, the answer was my mother. So we went back to the dinner table. He then proceeded to say that being a cleaner was a job of very great respect, exactly because it was a hard and dirty job that most people did not like to do themselves. He pointed out that our mother worked very hard to keep our house clean. Of course, when you are a 5-year-old boy, clean sheets appear by magic. Clean clothes appear by magic. 5-year-old boys are very self-centered and do not understand who is doing the cleaning around the house very much. So I learned my lesson. Cleaning was a job to be respected because someone has to do it, and in the household, that someone is your own mother. So here's a really good joke for my listeners and readers. Fast forward 25 years when I was 31, and after I'd done the Landmark Forum, I decided that I wanted to be an assistant for a forum that I had a friend in, and I was going to be a full-time assistant for the 3.5 days. The assistants had to arrive at 6 p.m. on the Thursday night, the day before Friday morning start-up, for the setup of the room. I was all excited as this was my first full-time assistant role, and because of my ego, I had believed I would get one of the better jobs that had to be done for a Landmark Forum. Nope, dear lady, can you guess what job I was allocated? If you've been reading along and listening along and you believe in karma, you will know which job was allocated to me, because it was perfect karma. You guessed it. My job was to clean the toilets for the next 3.5 days. For the next 3 days. Clean the toilets, that was my job. I only objected very slightly. I did say, did you say clean the toilets? You want me to clean the toilets for the next 3 days? I did ask that. And they said, yes, your job is cleaning the toilets. This is your first time, you get to clean the toilets. So I only objected very slightly because my father's words came back to me. It was good enough for my mother to clean the toilets after me for 18 years, then it was certainly good enough for me to clean the toilets at the Landmark Forum for the Landmark Forum participants for 3 days. And clean them I did. I was on my hands and knees scrubbing. Sorry, I'm just remembering this and laughing. I was on my hands and knees and scrubbing. I made those toilets damn well spotless. I was going to make those toilets the cleanest they had ever been in their lifetime. I was so enthusiastic about cleaning the toilets that many people asked me what I did for a living. And I told them I was one of the top IT consultants in the country in my area of expertise, that I ran my own company and had household names as my clients. And they would look at me in shock and ask, why are you cleaning the toilets then? And I would answer, because they have to be cleaned and someone has to clean them, and it might as well be me. And I'm not above cleaning toilets. And I would say it with a big grin and a smile and great enthusiasm. Many people remarked on how someone of my professional and family situation would be or could be so enthusiastic about getting on my knees and scrubbing toilets after every break for 3 days. Of course, being a Christian man at the time, I was also well aware of the story of Jesus cleaning the feet of his disciples. And to give you one more lesson on how cleanliness is next to godliness, when I was travelling from Ireland a lot, Jennifer kept the house like a pigsty. She would not clean the house properly, and she would not give the children chores around the house and make them do their fair share. She had grown up in a very messy house, and she had decided that cleaning a rented house was a waste of time and effort. She had kept our house in Australia in reasonable condition, apart from Jared's room, which she allowed to be dirty, which I strongly criticised her for. I criticised her heavily each time I would come home as to how she kept the house. One time, Christmas 2003, the house was such a mess and the kitchen was such a mess the day after Christmas that I said, okay, that's it, the house is a pigsty, If you will not clean this house as the woman of the house, I will clean it myself. I started in the kitchen and cleaned the kitchen, filling the dishwasher, etc. I vacuumed the living areas and put away the rubbish from Christmas Day the day before. Jennifer and the children were actually mocking me and laughing at me as I cleaned. They actually mocked me. My own wife was encouraging my own children to laugh at me and mock me as I did her job for her to demonstrate that this is how you keep a clean house. And I was only home from Saudi Arabia for 3 weeks for my Christmas holidays. I was trying to get some well-needed rest and time with my family after a 6-month stint in Saudi Arabia. And here I was being mocked in my own house doing my wife's work on my holiday. I was making a very strong point of the lack of respect shown for me and shown for the house, which was property we were renting. I was determined to clean the house very nicely and show the children that cleaning was a job of great respect that someone had to do. I also wanted to show them that cleaning a house shows respect for the property you are living in and respect for me, the provider, for providing the house to live in. Anyway, it came time to empty the dishwasher. As it happened, the coffee cups went in a cupboard to the upper left of the dishwasher. I was, by this time, tired and quite angry at being mocked in my own house, and I was not taking care of how I turned. I twisted my back without moving my feet, and I felt the discs slip in my back. I'm very familiar with the feeling, having had it happen a few times. I knew that shortly I would be completely incapacitated and would need to lay down for the next 10 days or so. I went to Jennifer and the children and told them that in doing Jennifer's job, I had accidentally slipped some discs in my back and that I was going to bed now to attempt to recover so that I could return to work in 2 weeks. The children would ask to come to see me in my bed, and most of the time I told them no. When I allowed them in, I told them something like this: "Your mother and you thought it was funny to keep this house that I provide you like a pigsty. You thought it was funny to disrespect me and disrespect what I provide for you. So I made an example and I cleaned the house myself. Unfortunately, I injured myself and now I am in great pain. Now I must have rest so that I can return to Saudi Arabia to pay for this house that you think it is so funny to keep like a pigsty. I had come home to spend time with you because I love you. Now we will miss that time together because you think it is so funny to keep this house so badly. Let this be a lesson for you." Then I sent them from my bedroom. I didn't speak to them much at all because when you have 2 slipped discs, you just want to be left alone. It is very painful. Now, would Jennifer actually show me any sympathy for slipping 2 discs and being in great pain as an accident while doing her job for her? No. She would sit right there next to me on the bed, talking to her friends on the telephone about how I had a back of glass or a weak back and managed to slip some discs merely by putting coffee cups away and twisting my back improperly. For her, this was a subject of amusement. When I told Sue One that my wife openly mocked me when I was injured doing her housework for her, she was furious. Her comment was, "Jennifer is an evil, evil woman. The devil is in her." Sue One used to often say, "The devil is in your wife. She's an evil woman." Interestingly, the next time I was back in Ireland about 6 months later, the house was spotless. So I took Jennifer aside and asked her what had changed. Why is the house spotless? She said that her and the children had talked over what had happened over the Christmas break and agreed that they had been very wrong to keep the house untidy and very wrong to mock me for injuring myself tidying the house when I was the one who did all the work to pay for everything in the first place. She then said what I knew to be true, but what she and the children had to find out for themselves. Sad that she had to find this out at 40 years of age. She said words to the effect: "The funny thing is, now that we all pitch in and do the housework together and we keep the house spotless, we all feel better about being in the house. We feel proud of our efforts and we feel proud of our house. We respect our house. We respect you more for making it possible for us to live in such a comfortable life in such a lovely house." I looked at her very hard and said very somberly, "You are 40 years old and you have just learned this lesson?" "I learned this lesson when I was 5. I shook my head. I turned on my heel and walked away from her. I was pleased she was keeping the house clean, as was my wish. I was disgusted that she had taken until 40 years of age to learn the simple lesson that keeping your living area clean and tidy makes it a more pleasant environment to be in and reflects your own self-value and respect for your property. How can someone get to 40 years of age and not know this? When I was in Saudi Arabia for 15 months, I lived in my own small apartment. The Philippine maids would come and clean the house for almost nothing if you asked them to, and I refused to pay for a cleaner. My colleagues would ask me why I would do that since they were almost free. I told them that every cent I earn is important for my family and that I am not above cleaning my own house and taking care of myself. And they appreciated, understood and respected my position. That is the end of the second lesson for the day, my dear ladies. Quality men notice when women are above the household chores. They understand when a woman makes it clear that she will not clean a house for her children, that she will let them live in a pigsty, and not demand her children that they keep their own living spaces clean and tidy. Such women are not attractive to quality men. No amount of shaming language is going to browbeat a quality man into becoming the woman of the house to do the cooking and the cleaning. Why? Because quality men know that to do the women's work and to identify around the house as an equal to the woman is the path to the woman hating him and despising him for being unmanly. And such is now starting to be known. Us quality men have known this all our lives. I don't know how anybody misses it, but apparently you had to have a survey and a study to find this out. The New York Times just ran an article stating the obvious, something that quality men have always known instinctively. The article is called, "Does a more equal marriage mean less sex?" We now live in a society where the woman is the sole determiner as to whether sex happens in a marriage. We now live in a society that says any attempt by a husband to persuade his wife into having sex is controlling and abusive and harassment and could very easily lead to a false rape allegation. That's what Western society is. So us quality men know full well that if we try to please our women by becoming more effeminate and taking on female roles, we are only setting ourselves up for failure. Indeed, we have heard so much about how women would love to be able to go out and be the breadwinner while the man stayed at home and looks after the kids. And yet, what happens when a man makes this dream of the woman come true? She is far more likely to divorce him. That's what happens. This is obvious, but it seems women always need a study to tell them what men know as obvious. And there is a link there. Stay-at-home husbands more likely to divorce. So this is the lesson for today, my dear ladies. Quality men who want good wives find women who take pride in cooking and cleaning more attractive than women who refuse to cook and clean. Gee, talk about revelations. Or even women who see these as chores to be endured and not privileges to be enjoyed. What you do with this lesson is up to you. Now, you can deny that it's the truth. You can deny that it's a fact. You can call me a male chauvinist pig. But, quality men prefer women who see it as a privilege to cook and clean for their family. We really do. Okay? So that's your lesson for today. Thank you very much for listening.